Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. You ready to explore some Rumi with me today?
Always ready for some Rumi. Let's do it.
Awesome. So we're going to be looking at a lecture today, and I think this one should be really interesting for anyone who's ever been in any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Basically all of us, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's not just about romantic love either, though.
Right.
Right? This lecture gets into all kinds of connections between people.
Totally. Parent-child friendships, even the unique bond between a therapist and their patient.
Exactly. It's about those underlying dynamics that make relationships tick. And what's really cool is that the lecture brings in a bunch of psychological research too. So we'll be weaving together Rumi's ancient wisdom with some modern-day brain science.
I love it when we can do that. It's like this amazing dialogue across centuries, right?
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with all this? I know I was totally hooked by the story of the king and the maidservant.
Ah, yes. Classic Rumi tale.
Right. You've got this powerful king, used to getting everything he wants, but then, bam, he falls head over heels for a simple maidservant. What?
It's definitely a curveball. It's supposed to make you think.
Okay, so I get that Rumi's using this story to teach us something, but what does this have to do with me?
Yeah.
Living my normal everyday life.
Well, that's the beauty of Rumi. He takes these larger-than-life stories, and he uses them to reveal something universal about the human heart.
Okay, so there's got to be a deeper principle at play here.
Right.
Not just a random king with a thing for maidservants.
Exactly. The lecture dives into this idea of affinity, which is basically this inherent attraction we feel towards certain people.
Okay, so we vibe with some people more than others. We've all experienced that. But what's that got to do with the king and the maidservant?
Well, think of it this way. Their connection might seem totally random on the surface.
Right.
But it's actually pointing to this idea that all relationships, even the unexpected ones, are built on a foundation of shared affinity.
So you're saying there's a reason we're drawn to certain people, even if we don't consciously realize it?
Exactly. It's like this invisible thread that connects us.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. But have you ever felt drawn to someone you totally didn't expect to connect with?
Oh yeah, all the time. It happens to everyone.
Right, someone from a totally different background or with a completely different personality, and then you find yourself totally clicking with them. It's wild.
Exactly. And that's what Rumi's getting at with this story. He's saying that those unexpected connections can actually reveal something about us, like what we're unconsciously seeking in a relationship.
Whoa, okay, now that's deep. I'm going to have to think about that one for a minute. So we've got this idea of affinity, but is there any scientific evidence to back this up?
Well, there's some fascinating research by anthropologist Helen Fisher. And she actually looked at the brain activity of people in love.
No way. Wait, so you can actually see love happening in the brain?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And what's even crazier is that Fisher found that people in love, they're often willing to sacrifice anything, even their lives, for the person they love.
Okay, that's intense. It's like that Romeo and Juliet kind of love.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it really supports Rumi's idea that love can be this incredibly powerful unifying force in our lives.
Makes you wonder about all those epic love stories we hear about. But I have a question. So if we're talking about brain science and love, does that mean all love is basically the same at a neurological level?
Ah, that's where it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
Because Fisher also found that the three main components of love, passion, commitment, and intimacy, they can actually show up in different parts of the brain.
Hold up. So you're telling me that our brains can be experiencing these different aspects of love towards different people?
Exactly. You could feel passionate love for your romantic partner, but also have deep commitment to your family and close intimacy with your friends, all at the same time.
Whoa, my mind is officially blown. That's so different from what I always thought about love, this whole one true love kind of thing.
Yeah. Rumi definitely emphasized the importance of focusing all those aspects of love towards a single worthy recipient. He saw that as the path to real transformation. But he also understood that achieving that kind of mature, unified love is a process. It's a journey.
Okay, so then how do we even begin to navigate this journey towards more mature love? What did Rumi see as the essential ingredients?
Well, one key element that this lecture highlights is the concept of adab.
Adab. Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. What's that all about?
It's a really rich concept, encompassing things like proper conduct, respect, and etiquette in relationships.
So it's not just about fiery passion and grand gestures.
Right. There's a level of mindfulness and respect that's really crucial for building a strong foundation for love.
I can already see how this might play out in my own life, thinking about how I show up in my relationships.
Exactly. And to make adab a little more concrete, Think about an infant learning to navigate the world and their relationship with their mother.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the mother can't always be instantly available, right? She can't fulfill every single whim of the child. But the child, as they grow, they learn to understand those limitations and actually develop a deeper appreciation for the relationship.
That's a really cool way to think about it. Like we learn about adab from our earliest relationships.
Precisely. And that sets the stage for how we approach all kinds of connections later in life.
I like that. It makes it feel more like something we can actually practice and cultivate.
Exactly. It's not just some abstract idea. It's something we can embody in our everyday interactions.
So we've got affinity and adab, but I'm also thinking about vulnerability. Like, how does that fit into the picture of building healthy relationships?
You've hit on something really important.
Mm-hmm.
Because we live in a culture that often praises independence and self-sufficiency. But Rumi suggests that true maturity actually lies in recognizing our neediness, our vulnerability, and our dependence on others.
Wait, so you're saying that admitting we need other people isn't a weakness, but a sign of strength?
Exactly. It goes against everything we're often told. But think about it. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for real intimacy to blossom.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's like by trying to be so independent, we might actually be pushing away genuine connection.
Right. And the lecture even brings in Helen Fisher's research to back this up. She found that specific areas of the brain light up when someone is in love, like the ventral tegmental area and the caudate nucleus.
Okay, now you're getting into the nitty-gritty brain stuff. But what did those areas do?
They're the regions associated with reward motivation and even addiction. So it's like our brains are literally wired for connection.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So it's not just some fluffy feel-good concept. There's a real biological basis for our need to connect.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if by denying that need, we're actually going against our own nature.
Right. Like we're trying to fight against something that's deeply ingrained in us.
Exactly. So if vulnerability is so key to intimacy, how do we actually learn to embrace it, especially if we've been hurt or let down in the past? It can be scary to put ourselves out there.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, how do we know who to trust with our vulnerability?
That's where the real work begins, the journey of self-discovery. Before we can truly connect with others, we need to understand our own patterns, our defenses, and the ways we might be unconsciously sabotaging our relationships.
Okay, so it starts with looking inward, right before we can even begin to build healthy connections with others.
Precisely. And one way to start is by reflecting on your own experiences. Think back to a time when you felt truly vulnerable in a relationship. What did that experience teach you about yourself and about the nature of the connection? Did it deepen the bond, or did it reveal something you needed to address?
Whoa, that's a powerful question. I'm going to sit with that one for a while. But you know what? This whole conversation is making me realize that love is way more complex and nuanced than I ever imagined. It's not just this feeling that happens to us. It's like an ongoing process of growth and discovery.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
It does. But it also makes it a little daunting,
Yeah.
Like, how do we even begin to navigate all this complexity?
Well, one thing that helps is remembering that we're not alone in this journey. Every single person on this planet is grappling with these same questions about love, connection, and vulnerability.
That's true. It's kind of comforting in a way, like we're all in this together.
Exactly. And that sense of shared humanity can be a really powerful source of support as we navigate the ups and downs of relationships.
I love that. So we're not just talking about romantic love here, right? This applies to all kinds of connections.
Absolutely. It's about learning to cultivate adab in all our relationships, whether it's with our partners, our families, our friends, or even ourselves.
So it's like this ongoing practice of mindfulness, respect, and understanding.
Precisely. And the more we practice, the more we'll be able to experience those deep, fulfilling connections that Rumi talks about.
I'm so ready to dive deeper into this.
Me too. Let's do it. Yeah, it really does make you think about how we define strength.
Right.
Like maybe needing no one isn't actually the ideal. Maybe it's more about recognizing our interdependence.
Yeah, like admitting that we need each other could actually be the truest sign of psychological growth.
I think that's a really insightful way to look at it. It definitely challenges that whole rugged individualist ideal that our culture often glorifies.
Totally. It's like instead of striving to be completely self-sufficient, we should be embracing the fact that we're all interconnected, part of this web of relationships where we can both give and receive support.
Exactly. Like we're all threads in this giant tapestry. And by acknowledging our need for each other, we actually make the whole tapestry stronger.
I love that analogy. It's so beautiful. And it's funny. Because at the beginning of this deep dive, I have to admit, the story of the king and the maidservant felt kind of out there. Like, what does this ancient tale have to do with my life? But now I'm starting to see how these stories can offer such profound insights into the human condition, even centuries later.
Rumi was a master at tapping into those universal truths about love loss and the search for connection. And those truths are just as relevant today as they were back then.
Right. It's like he understood something fundamental about human nature that transcends time and culture.
Totally. And one of the things he understood so well was that love isn't just about romantic passion. It's about cultivating adab in all our relationships, respecting boundaries and recognizing that divine spark in ourselves and in others.
I'm realizing that love is way more multifaceted than I ever gave it credit for. It's not just a feeling, it's a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that journey requires us to embrace our vulnerability, be open to the unexpected ways that connection can show up in our lives, and to cultivate adab in all our interactions.
You know what? I'm feeling really inspired to bring more of that into my own life. More adab, more vulnerability, more conscious awareness of how I'm showing up in my relationships.
Me too. And that brings us to something really important that the lecture touches on, which is the idea that expressing vulnerability can be risky, especially with people who might not be capable of reciprocating that openness, or worse, might even take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It's like, how do we know who to trust with our vulnerability?
That's where discernment comes in. It's about being mindful of who we choose to open up to.
Oh, yeah.
And recognizing when a relationship might not be meeting our needs.
Right. Like sometimes we need to set boundaries to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And that's not selfish.
Yeah.
It's actually a sign of self-respect.
Yeah.
And allows us to create space for healthier, more fulfilling connections.
Okay, so discernment is key. But how do we actually develop that? Like, how can we tell if someone is trustworthy or not?
Well, the lecture actually shares a really interesting anecdote about a woman who grew up with multiple caregivers. All of them were loving and supportive. But she later struggled to find that singular focused love as an adult.
Really? Why is that?
It turned out that her capacity for connection had been spread among so many people growing up that it made it harder for her to direct all three aspects of love: passion, commitment, and intimacy towards one person.
That's so interesting. It's like even positive experiences can have unforeseen consequences down the line.
Totally. And it highlights the importance of understanding our own relationship history and how it might be shaping our patterns.
So we need to be aware of our own baggage, basically.
Exactly. And that awareness can help us make more conscious choices about who we choose to be vulnerable with.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about the importance of vulnerability and adab, but what about the actual process of falling in love? Like, how does that fit into all of this?
So remember how we talked about the king's initial infatuation with the maidservant? He eventually shifts his affection towards a divine healer, a figure who represents a higher form of love.
Right. I remember that part of the story. But I have to admit, I was kind of confused by it. Like, why did he just move on to someone else?
It's not about him replacing one love with another. It's more about the expansion of his heart, his capacity for love evolving to embrace different forms of connection.
I never thought about it that way. But that makes a lot of sense. It's like he's not abandoning one love for another, but rather recognizing that different forms of love can coexist, each serving a unique purpose in our lives.
Exactly. And that's a really important point, because we often get caught up in this idea of finding the one, like there's only one person out there who can fulfill all our needs.
Right. It's like this fairy tale narrative that we've been fed since childhood.
Totally. But Rumi's story challenges that narrative. He's saying that love isn't about finding that one perfect person. It's about cultivating a heart that's open to different forms of connection.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. So we can have passionate love for a partner, deep familial love, and the platonic love we share with friends.
Exactly. And as we grow and evolve, our understanding of love might shift and deepen as well. We might move from seeking purely romantic love to cultivating a more expansive sense of connection with the world around us.
Right, like that idea of adab that we talked about earlier. It's about learning to express our needs and desires in a way that respects others and allows for genuine connection to flourish.
Precisely. And that's something we can practice in all our relationships, not just romantic ones.
This whole deep dive is really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about love. It's so much more complex and nuanced than I ever imagined.
It is. And that's what makes it so fascinating.
It really does. But you know what? I'm also feeling a sense of hope. Like, even though love can be messy and challenging, it's also incredibly beautiful and transformative.
I agree. It's a force that can truly change our lives for the better.
And it's something that we can all cultivate and nurture within ourselves.
Absolutely. And the more we do that, the more we'll be able to experience the kind of deep, fulfilling connections that Rumi talks about.
I'm so grateful for this conversation. That's really opened my eyes to a whole new way of thinking about love.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to explore these ideas in their own lives.
I'm sure they are. And I'm excited to hear what insights and aha moments they have to share with us.
Me too. So, if you're listening, we'd love to hear from you. What resonated with you in this deep dive? What questions are swirling around in your mind?
Share your thoughts and reflections with us. We're all on this journey together.
Yeah, it's like we're so conditioned to think that needing anyone is a weakness. But maybe it's actually the opposite. Like maybe acknowledging our interconnectedness is where the real strength lies.
Totally. It's like this paradigm shift. Right? Instead of the lone wolf always going it alone, we recognize that we're part of this intricate web of relationships.
And that by supporting each other, we actually become stronger individuals.
Exactly. It's not about losing ourselves in those connections, but rather about recognizing that our individual growth is intertwined with the well-being of the whole. I never thought about it that way. But it makes so much sense, you know? It's funny how at the beginning of this deep dive, the story of the king and the maidservant felt so far removed from my own life. But now I'm seeing how these ancient tales can offer such profound insights into the human condition, even centuries later.
Rumi had this incredible ability to tap into those universal truths about love loss and the search for connection. And those truths are just as relevant today as they were in his time.
Right. It's like he understood something fundamental about human nature that transcends time and culture.
And one of the key things he emphasized was the importance of cultivating adab in all our relationships, respecting boundaries, and recognizing the divine spark within ourselves and others.
I'm realizing that love is so much more than just a feeling. It's a journey of self-discovery and growth. It's about embracing vulnerability, being open to the unexpected ways that connection can show up in our lives, and cultivating AB in all our interactions. This entire deep dive has really opened my eyes to a whole new way of thinking about love and relationships.
Me too. And if I could leave our listeners with one final thought, it would be this. If love is a journey of self-discovery, what is one small step you can take today to cultivate ADAB, embrace your vulnerability, and deepen your connections with the people in your life?
That's such a beautiful question to reflect on. And to our listener, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you in this deep dive? What questions are swirling around in your mind?
Share your aha moments with us. We're all on this journey together.
It's been an absolute pleasure diving into Rumi with you today.
Likewise, until next time, keep exploring those deep connections.
And keep diving deep.